Hello and welcome to a new series here on my channel where I aim to give a brief and hopefully accessible introduction to some key academic concepts and theories. I've become acutely aware recently that at the beginning of the next academic year I have to start doing a little bit of teaching, and as part of that I've been really keen to make sure I'm going back and revisiting some really core academic texts. In reconnecting with some of those core ideas, I thought a way to make it a little bit more fun for myself as well as to provide some wonderful content for my YouTube channel, I would create some short videos in which I sum up some particular ideas. As always, I'm going to start from theatre, but I'm likely to slowly spiral out and start to bring in some concept which will be applicable to many other fields of study as well. So, without further ado, here is the first episode of What the Theory, in which I look at postdramatic theatre. So, I directed a piece as part of a short play festival recently, and gradually throughout the process I realised that none of the pieces were what I would describe as plays. And this got me thinking a lot about postdramatic theatre, which I feel is something we talk about an awful lot in an academic context, but is a term which hasn't particularly travelled an awful lot into mainstream theatre making. So, here's a brief introduction. The term postdramatic theatre was coined by Hans Theis Lehmann in his 1999 book of the same name. It was published in Germany in 1999, but wasn't translated into English until 2006. Now, just as with the broader artistic and philosophical movement of postmodernism, which postdramaticism is part of, we can't really understand postdramatic theatre without understanding what dramatic theatre is. Plays, basically. Dramatic theatre is, broadly speaking, mimetic in that it aims to mimic real life. It is also totalising. It creates a complete world, a fictional world, and populates it with characters, and asks an audience to believe wholly and completely within those characters. It may or may not invoke the idea of a fourth wall, in which the characters are not aware that an audience is there, but a use of monologue or soliloquy does not mean a piece of theatre is not dramatic, as long as the characters are still addressing the audience as their fictional character. Dramatic theatre also has a closed logic. So time may move forwards, backwards, or hop around, and we may hop between many different locations, but we will always do so for a reason. Characters will also always be very specific and have particular backgrounds and particular desires for the future. Increasingly, however, over the latter half of the 20th century, dramatists and theatre makers sought to experiment with the flaws in this mimetic type of theatre. Dramatists started to carry out playful explorations of the failure of this totalising representative act. Martin Crimp's attempt on her life is a particularly good example. Consisting of 17 scenes, the play is a number of attempts to describe or define or characterise the central character of Anne, who never appears on stage. She is at once an actress, a terrorist, a victim, a hero, even a car at one point. Some of the scenes, when we view them alongside each other, we can begin to draw links from, but just as many seem to be describing a completely different individual. The play is a barrage of information, which in many ways doesn't add up to a simple, single, logical conclusion. And this is very typical of postdramatic theatre. It explores the idea that our experience of the world is very rarely as causal and logical as our experience of traditional fiction is. In being so logical then, dramatic theatre actually fails to mimic our experience of the real world. We can see similar ideas in some of Sarah Kane's later work and in Caryl Churchill's plays, where quite often there is the use of blank verse, which instead of being attributed to particular characters in the play text, is left up to the creative team to distribute it within the rehearsal room. In some of their plays too, it is not the journey of a character which is explored, but the dramaturgy of an idea. Increasingly, a dramatist or playwright might not be involved in this process at all. An awful lot of postdramatic theatre is devised. Characters may actually introduce themselves as the performer that is playing them. They may introduce themselves with their actual real world name. In these cases, fiction is done away with altogether. For examples of this kind of work, we can look at the work of Ontroerend, Forced Entertainment and Get in the Back of the Van. As I mentioned at the beginning, post-dramatic theatre is largely defined in opposition to dramatic theatre. In many ways, it is what it is not. It can vary hugely in form and content, but central to it is the idea of a rejection of simple, logical, causal sense being made from a piece of theatre. As a movement, it contests that the world is best represented not through things which make simple, logical, causal sense, but in the conflicting, the contested, and the unreconcilable multiple logics. Thank you very much for watching this very first episode of What the Theory. It'd be really interesting to find out if there's any particular kind of concepts or anything you'd like me to focus on. It's been quite fun to do something slightly new. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing or giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you very much and have a great week.